Hold up. Attention, councillors, team. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm going to invite Councillor Foss to open the meeting with karakia.
Thank you, Chair. Along with me, please. Whakataka te hau ki te uru. Whakataka te hau ki te taonga. Ke mā kina kina ke uta. Ke mā tara tara ki tai. E hei aki ana, e te akatukura, e te hau, e huka, e hau, tihei, mari.
Thank you. Apologies. Apologies from councillors. Have any apologies? No apologies. Okay. Housekeeping. I've got to do some housekeeping now. We live in a modern world. Just to advise everybody here, this meeting is being live streamed on Council's Facebook and is being recorded for viewing later on YouTube. In the event of an earthquake, drop, cover and hold. Shaking is long and strong. When the shaking subsides, leave the buildings for the nearest exit. Go here to Dalton Street and move towards Bluff Hill and climb up the steps to Cameron Road on the top there. If the emergency alarm sounds as did this morning, immediately evacuate the buildings for the nearest exit and proceed to the assembly area on the grass corner out that way on the corner of Dalton and Vortier. Council chambers is currently designated as a public place, and council policy is that with physical distancing in place, those in the chamber are to wear a mask while seated. If you move away from your seat, you must wear a mask. Toilets are located down the end of the hall, and I have one other small apology on behalf of myself, because I should have attended the Waitangi Day celebration, but due to a medical event with one of my family, I had to be in hospital helping them, and so I was unable to attend. This is no disrespect to the day. The other point I'd make is that the public health system worked superbly well, without fault, so very good to them. Right, conflicts of interest declarations. Anybody got a conflict of interest they'd like to declare? There being none, we'll move on. Confirmation of the January 26 minutes of 2022. These have been circulated. Doubtless you've all read them, scrutinised them, and has there any errors or omissions in them? There being none, I'll invite a councillor to move that they be agreed. Councillor Jackie Taylor, Bill Foley. With the motion, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Contrary no. Carried. Follow-ups from the previous meetings. They're here. Now, Chief Executive, would you like to lead us through these? I think they're all pretty self-explanatory.
Take them as read, Chair, and
Right.
happy to take any questions.
Okay, councillors, any matters following up on the follow-ups? All right, well, have the follow-ups be taken, someone to move the follow-ups be received?
Come on, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Van Beek, Councillor Ormsby, all those in favour say aye.
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 Significant activities.
Again, Chair, we'll take it as read. Members of the executive team are available to answer any particular questions. Overall, I think it does demonstrate that the organisation continues to make significant progress across strategic projects as well as business as usual. Most of the headwinds that we're encountering are well known to Council and do either relate to the COVID situations or other pressures in the wider economy around procurement of suppliers and suppliers, but otherwise we've had a very steady start to the year and I think we're well and truly underway.
Good, thank you. Well, I'll go around the table and see if anybody's got any questions or follow-ups. I'll start with my left. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Just one question, I think. Can I just ask in relation to item 38, whole of region, what an extension event is? There are 5 extension events planned across the region in March.
So extension's a term typically used to describe the process of imparting knowledge, so extending knowledge or extending the transfer of technology from a research context or a policy context into the operating landscape where it needs to be given effect to. So in this context, it's pulling together farmer groups and providing them with knowledge about the technology that stockwater reticulation involves and the benefits it brings for farm productivity and climate resilience. So it's probably a little bit coded, but it is a standard term for that sort of activity.
Thank you. It sounds a lot more promising than an extinction event. So I'm
Very good.
Very much so.
Councillor Curtin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two questions. If I could take look at the central catchment COVID fast-track consenting Riverbend residential development. And my question is, has there been an approach or discussion with the applicants? I appreciate it's an EPA administered process, but has there been any communication with the applicants around their plans or any involvement at all with the parties?
I'll defer to either Chris or Katrina on that.
Through you, Chair, the regulatory team provided input to the EPA process, noting concerns from this organisation about the application and further information that we thought was necessary for the application to proceed. The EPA have taken that information and put in a further information request to the application that largely replicates the things that we have asked for.
Thank you. We'll obviously be keeping a strong, close brief on that. Can I go secondly, Mr. Chair, to page 15, and it's item 9 in the traffic light scenario, financial upgrade system fuse. That obviously hasn't been indicated as to progress, and it's noted as concluding. I wonder whether we could just have a little bit more detail on the next steps for the fuse project.
So the intention is to bring a project review. So the project's closed, and we'll review the project and bring that through to corporate and strategic with an update on the corporate plan.
For the sake of the report here, it's implementing. It's up to the implementation phase. So will that change the?
The finance system itself has been implemented.
Yes.
So the project to implement the system delivered, that project has completed.
So it's one part of the project or one project within.
It's within a wider transformational, organisational program of work.
And we'll bring
so,
back
but we
the
can
paper.
provide more of an update, I think, to the corporate and strategic committee would be
Thank
useful.
Councillor Foss.
Thanks. Item 27, 28, 29, the Karamu River Catchment Collective. James, could you just give us a bit more colour to that, and then how that fits with the two yet to be appointed officers for Hbrc and Karamu coordination? And the question is, how and when will that improve the quality of those waterways?
So recently, last year or so, the Ministry for Primary Industry has been allocated funding to support rural catchment collectives to improve water quality around the country. And in light of that, we've collaborated with the Landcare Trust, who are the recipients of some of this funding in different parts of the country, to pull together some of the existing landowner groups in that catchment to come up with a catchment improvement plan for the rural land. And that is something we see as complementary to the work that we'll be doing in the urban environment, and that they will be mutually reinforcing. It will be a priority for the the catchment coordinator for Karamu, who I understand is starting in April, to liaise with this group and with the Landcare Trust, and we'll bring together the whole package and then report back to council in due course. I think one of the things that's potentially quite exciting here is that we will end up with a catchment that will have a program of work drawing both rural landowners as well as urban communities together to work on the problem in a shared way, whereas typically catchment collectives have operated in rural communities only. And this is, I guess, a bit of a new one for us. Similarly, in the report, you'll see that there is work happening in the Ahuriri catchment as well with rural landowners. And similarly there, I think we've got the opportunity to be ensuring that we're working on point source discharges and diffuse discharges from the urban environment as well as the rural environment. And together, they should make a material difference in time to water quality in the catchment.
So is that why the territorial authorities, Hastings, has been out looking at the Karamu with some of your team? Is that part of this catchment group, or is that something separate?
So it is in the context of all of this work, and certainly the discussion with the Hastings District Council is that we would like to work more closely together. We are required to, as part of the tank plan change policies, for improving water quality, and given their role in the many pipes that enter into the Karamu stream and the Karamu catchment generally from urban stormwater, they're a critical partner in all of this as well. Yeah.
Councillor Taylor.
No, they were my questions too, but I'm happy with that, thank you.
Dan Bake.
Yeah, alluding to what Craig just mentioned, conflict of interest, I'm actually a chair of the Raupari Twyford Water Scheme, and we're actually part of this. And I must commend Landcare and Hawkesbury Regional staff for the excellent work they're doing, trying to actually bring this whole rori into one. And there seems to be some real traction happening there. Also, point 34, just for clarification, unfortunately Ian is not here, but NIWA riparian management course for staff, what kind of training is actually mentioned by riparian management?
So, Chair, I don't think anybody present today will be able to answer that question. So I suggest that in the follow-ups we provide a summary of that workshop for the next meeting.
Yeah, I can actually pick up the phone and I can talk to Ian unless anyone has got an interest in it. I'll take it upon myself to do that. Thank you. And then 38. Once again, it's always been very dear to me since the crippling drought of 2020 that we're now actually looking at. Stock water reticulation right around Hawke's Bay, and I think that's really, once again, thank you very much for enacting upon that. So that's really great, and the farmers and the farmer groups I've talked to, they're really supportive of this and understand the need for it in time of climate change especially. Thank you very much.
Councillor Foley.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up with that, Councillor Van Beek, certainly the solar pumping technology has made huge difference to that program of work happening around farms. Could I just ask one question? Traffic light system number 16, flood control up at Tuki. So risks being managed, market engagement. On the first tender there, you say you received 4 submissions. So does that, just if you can give me a flavour, is that a good number? Has that kind of negated that risk? Is that kind of what you expected?
Yeah, look, so of course we would have probably preferred a few more, but 4 demonstrates a competitive environment, which is what we were wanting to achieve. And we have let 2 contracts which are commencing now, so that's a great outcome. And tranche 2 will be advertised in March, and then will be a rolling event from there.
Okay, and just to one more clarification around that project, the other risks, achieving extraction within budget, and probably more so the time frame. So the way you've labelled it there at this stage is still on schedule, but it still just remains a risk. Is that how am I reading that?
Yeah, so it's something we're constantly looking at, but at this stage we believe we're on track to deliver the scope, and if that changes, we'll raise it here in this.
Cool, thank you.
Charlie.
Yeah, just to go back to that one, Chair, about the extension events.
Yep.
So what's happening with the Wairoa one got there?
So I don't have the detail on that, Councillor. I'll ask the team to contact you directly and provide you with some information about where and when, and hopefully they can accommodate your involvement as well. Very good.
And one more place, is it too early for the Hawke plan change to be reported on as a project, or?
Yes.
The answer I'm giving is yes. And I guess the issue with Mohaka is that it is rolling into Kotahi, and we have got obviously reporting on Kotahi in here, and yeah, so Mohaka does sit underneath there. Yes.
Mentioned here somewhere.
It'll need to come back to the RPC with a progress report at some stage in the not too distant future. I think probably next RPC meeting maybe.
The other?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, just with regards to the traffic light report of Project 2 Managed Aquifer Recharge, could or when will any information as a result of that project be presented to the TWR members of the RPC? Could you specify, give us a bit of detail on that? When might that happen?
I think it would be timely to give an update on the water security program more generally, I think. Whether it's the All Governors Day or beyond there, we'll go away and have a look at that. But that's a good prompt. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Ormsby.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Kia ora koutou. Couple of points. First one on the flood control schemes resilience funded projects. That is 9 in the central catchments. With the Taradale Stop Bank strengthening, I live around the corner and I see that's going really well. So just congratulations to the team for progressing all those IRD projects, particularly with this hearing the sad loss of David from the team. So I just wanted to congratulate the team on the progress of those.
Well, thank you. I'm sure the team will be very happy. Thank you.
The second question is around, I see there's 6 priority ecosystem prioritisation projects. Could we just have a quick rundown of actually where they are? I don't think we've been cited on the 6 priority sites.
So, Chair, unfortunately, Mr. Maxwell is somewhere in the depths of Rocky Order at the moment, doing some biosecurity control.
Possibly.
Good on him. He's on the payroll.
Musclers, I take it.
A follow-up?
So we'll bring that back as a follow-up to the next meeting.
Anything else?
Yep, that's it. Thank you.
All right. Michelle, going to the wall. Any questions? Mike, any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, mine have been covered off. Thanks very much. Absolutely appreciate it. Thanks, especially like the water potential water workshop. I think it's important. Kia ora.
I just want to, on the Waitangi Regional Park 17, I like the use of the word ephemeral wetlands. I take it these are transitory, so because that's what generally it means. So I always thought wetlands are kind of permanent, but can you describe to me what an ephemeral wetland is?
I think
The definition is a wetland that's not always wet. So, so they are at the margins. So I can't provide a lot more detail than the definition of the word.
Wetland.
Pretty clear.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Well, I'm interested to have a look at this. And the other thing is, I see that we're taking some trees out of willows at Whātumā, and just wanted to see that we've got some willows starting to grow through at Pakipaki. We're going to go and nail those willows as well, surely.
Pakipaki or Peka?
Peka.
So you mean Peka Peka?
Peka Peka.
Yep. So we are aware of that. Yep. So that'll go into the work program.
Oh, good, thank you. Would someone like to move that the significant activities report be received?
So moved, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Van Beek. Lambert, all those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
No, carried. Move on to minor items. Does anybody have minor items not on the agenda they would like to speak to briefly? Going.
Squeaky wheel? Fly dumping.
Fly dumping? Sly dumping.
Not sly. Sly as well. Yeah, whatever you want to call it.
Dumping, right?
Mr. Chair,
Yes?
ka ora te whenua. I was going to speak on that, my items, please.
It doesn't quite catch that. Was the what?
Ka ora te whenua project. And what else?
All right. The two topics. Thank you. Let's move on to the affixing the common seal.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
I presume Councillor Van Beek's done his usual assiduous work on this and is ready to move. He has.
If I'm known for something, it's for that.
Assiduous work, correct. All right. Do I have a seconder?
Yeah, sure.
We've got the end of the table. Councillor Foley. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no, carried. Next is a report from the Māori Committee. Who wishes to lead this? Mike, would you like to speak to this?
Michelle's chairing that. Yeah, Michelle's chairing that day.
Yeah, sharing that day. Just my notes. Okay, so we had, as you can see, there was a lot in the recent Māori Committee last month, beginning of the month. And just in addition, just a bit more explanation around the tile unit we mentioned. So we proposed an independent tile unit, similar to, based on the Mahanui Kura tile project in Ōtautahi and Christchurch. So it was around that, having an independent body to advise us around when we have environmental issues and resource consents and things like that. So that would be a unit that would be made up of priority would be Mātauranga Māori expertise, tonga tile, Western science advisors as well, and policy and RMA specialists that we can go to as tangata whenua, as mana whenua. And so that was the idea that came out of our meeting that we've taken back to all our boards and our hapu. So we'll bring back, we've been in the hui, there was a general consensus that in principle there's support for that. So that's that one. And other than that was the only additional piece I wanted to add to the report.
Okay.
Taken as read.
Thank you. Pierre, would you like to add something?
The paper can be taken as read. It has one recommendation, which is to receive it. In addition to the taiao unit, from the last meeting, all of the collateral that was acquired 2 years ago has been shared across both the RPC and also the Māori Committee. In addition to that, I've got discussions tomorrow with MFE to see whether or not we can get a framework that we can lift off the Waitaha, the Mahanui Kura tile, that might be of some help to the discussions that are taking place, as mentioned by Michelle.
Thank you. All right, any questions councillors might have? No questions? Councillor Foley.
Kia ora, Michelle. Perhaps more just a comment or point. 2.4 concerns around the coastal areas and plundering. I see it's not mentioned there. Maybe it was discussed. Just quite an issue at the Te Angiangi Marine Reserve at the moment as well, with no current dock employed ranger out there.
Thank you. Yeah, one of our very much our committee members, Paula Shasha, he just mentioned when there's a rahui, one area to help with the power seeding, and that unfortunately impacts on the next the next set of Kaimoana area, so they were just inundated on Porangahau. I think he said about, I cannot remember, I think it was the 70 trucks and trailers went in there and just cleared it out. And that's also happening in Mahi as well, that I'm hearing from my nephew. They're having a lot of problems there as well. So we're hoping to bring MPI and my nephew Paul Ratapu, who's the chair of the Customary Fisheries Committee, to come and speak to our committee next week on how you can address these issues. So, sure, I'll take that on board as well. Thank you.
All right, would someone like to move that the report be received?
I will.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor, Councillor Williams seconded. Any discussion?
Just to note, Chair, that I'd be very interested and excited to see how the tile unit model progresses and develops, and getting further advice and recommendations around the structure of that. So huge interest in that going forward.
Thank you. All right, all those in favour will say aye. Aye. The report be received. So contrary say no. Carried. We now come to the report from the Extraordinary Regional Transport Committee meeting, and I'll now pass to Councillor Williams to give us his introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, well, look, it as the name extraordinary itself implies, it was a meeting that was convened out of the ordinary run of scheduled meetings, but I did sense, as Transport Committee Chair, a need to obtain advice from all of our advisory members and reach, in effect, a coordinated regional position with respect to the decision made to reduce the speed limit over 76 kilometres of the Napier-Taupo highway. The resolutions that we passed are set out in the paper. They've been reasonably widely reported. I should note that the advice we got from the Māori Advisory Committee member Api Robbins, from AA, from Port of Napier, from the Road Transport Association, was unanimous that this is something that we should oppose. It was put to us that we're putting efficiency and economics before safety, and I think that that's the most unfair criticism. There isn't a single councillor or I would say sane person involved in the discussion that is doing that. It's actually a matter of ensuring that alongside the I guess, paramount consideration of safety, the other factors that concern the region around that decision are actually brought into the equation, and our fear is that they weren't, that it was purely a safety. So it's not just about safety first, it was a safety only consideration. This road corridor is a lifeline, and we heard very strongly from our communities about that. So the position is that the speed limit has reduced. We have asked Waka Kotahi to do a formal review. They have offered a review in 12 months' time, and after the fact, so we'll need to discuss at our next meeting what we make of that response. We are seeking legal advice on a legal challenge to that decision, and that advice is pending. So this situation isn't over. I don't think it's a position that the region can accept. The idea that any future investment in that corridor is confined to a level sufficient just to maintain the speed limit at 80 kilometres is not acceptable. I don't think, well, not to me and to the other voting members other than the Waka Kotahi representative on the Transport Committee. So it is a regionally coordinated response. I think that's needed, but the real issue here alongside safety is an approach to the Crown, and I've written to Minister Woods to say, hey, look, we need a fair share of investment in this region in what for us is a uniquely critical transport resource, no less so than the Auckland Harbour Bridge is for Tamaki Makaurau. So that's where it's at. Watch this space, and we're not going to, this isn't over.
Okay, thank you. Any questions that people have of the report?
Just a question for
Councillor
the
Van
Chair of the Transport Committee. I hear your resistance and I fully understand that, and I see the support in the paper for that. Are you as a committee going to monitor any of the accidents that may occur and whether those accidents are maybe due to the reduction of speed with people becoming more impatient because of the slow rate and the long queues of cars upon cars behind trucks and even in front of trucks, no doubt?
Well, that will be very interesting indeed. Quite how you determine without a coronial inquiry if there's a tragic case of a fatality, precisely the cause of a given accident would be the issue there, Councillor Van Beek. But one thing I can tell you is that in the analysis to date, there is no assessment of causation. It is all about consequences. So whether the accident in question was caused by inattention, intoxication, fatigue, distraction, or something to do with the road or the driver's speed, was nothing to do with the analysis. It was simply looking at the corridor, plugging in through a computer model certain metrics and popping out an answer. But perhaps that is something that we would need to assess in future. Again, that causation issue is very fraught, and part of our challenge to Waka Kotahi is that they haven't really factored that side of it in either. They've just driven purely from a consequences platform as to safety. So I totally get the logic of what you're saying, Councillor Van Beek, but it could be quite a difficult exercise. One thing I would also add is, in fairness to the position in favour of speed reduction, is that Matt Broderick, our police representative on the Transport Committee, said the driver frustration is actually at its highest when you know that you've actually got a part of the speed limit still to use that you're not able to access because the person in front of you is going too slow. And his view was that if you are sitting behind a car that's doing 75 and you know you can only do 80, it's a lot less frustrating than sitting behind a car doing 75 when you can do 100. So if he's right, then the frustration factor won't be as significant as perhaps the issues of freight and logistics for our primary sector and our port.
So, Chair?
Councillor Foss?
So if he's right, would it be easier if we just took everything down to 10 kilometres an hour?
Exactly.
Well, I think you can watch New Zealand reduce to 80 kilometres across the whole country under the Road to Zero program. If you saw the front page of the paper, that's what we're getting warmed up to. And yes, if you wanted 0 people killed on the road, you'd have to question what actually is an entirely safe speed limit. Certainly if you're not going to invest in those roads to the level they need to keep the speed limit at a more sustainable level.
So we're heading to a time where we'll have someone walk in front of a car with a red flag again.
Yeah. or behind it with a bucket and a spade.
And a little cross.
Right. Any other questions? Would you like to move your report?
Yes, I so move.
I move to a seconder. Councillor Ormsby. Right, would you like to speak to your report?
I think I've covered it. Councillor
Ormsby. Any other speakers? Councillor Van Beek.
I would just like to commend the activity and the skill that you bring to this debate, Councillor Williams, and I think you're doing a fantastic job. So I would say, personally, I would say keep this up. Well done.
Thank you very much.
I would echo that and say this is the most active and cohesive that the Regional Transport Committee has been in my experience of being associated with it, and I think it's doing a fine job.
Thank you very much, colleagues.
Anybody at the wall? Michelle? Mike? All right. Put the question. All those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no. Carried. Report on the Regional Planning Committee. Who's going to lead this? Would you like to lead this? Getty?
Notwithstanding that we have the co-chair here from our Regional Planning Committee, congratulations, Apiata. I'm happy for the paper to be taken as read and for the committee to consider the recommendation of receipt. But if there's any questions, happy to respond to those through you, Chair.
Thank you. Apiata, would you like to do some introductory comments?
No, I'm quite happy to take the report as read. The only comment I would add is that it has triggered off some activity into Whitehall, particularly around addressing some of our capability into the approaching future with regards to a targeted effort around coordinating the appointment of commissioners and looking at how we might resource that particular element of planning and policy going forward. So it's only just started, but the indicators are positive.
Excellent. Right. Any questions from councillors? Being none, would someone care to move the report be received?
Happy to move.
Councillor Ormsby, Councillor Lambert.
No.
Anybody like to speak? All right, I'll put the question. All those in favour of receiving the report, say aye.
Aye.
Up to no, carried. Reports from outside bodies. Has anybody got an out-of-body experience they'd like to talk about? Councillor Van Beek.
Would you like me to speak? Okay. I thought you were taking names of all those who wanted to speak, but anyway, I seems to be the only one. 2.7, the Hawke's Bay Cycling Governance Group, which possibly, and there is a chance that actually that won't exist for much longer. And I just would like to give you a bit of background to that, and I'm just to have still the discussion with the chair of the Transport Committee. There seems to be within Hawke's Bay a total lack of willingness to adopt a new way of actually getting ourselves around. And it's not just about cycling, it's about public transport as well. We don't actually have proper strategies that are being enacted. The Hawke's Bay Regional Transport Committee has adopted a strategy where they listened to submitters. And I must say, it's one of the few submission processes that I've seen in action that actually really listened to those who presented and brought their thoughts to the table and their wishes and their concerns, and they've adapted those. But unfortunately, the Transport Committee itself can put a strategy in place, but then the enforcement, the enactment, there's actually no real alignment between TAs as governors, councillors, and the engineers and staff. I can't see no real connection. And so we're struggling with getting cycling established for a purpose. From a recreational point of view, we're doing extremely well. Vicky Butterworth, who's one of our staff, has done an exceptional job over time with the trails, and we're a jewel in the country for that perspective. But when it comes to actually climate change and changing our ways, the regional strategy, I'll just take my mask on because I'm nearly loss of oxygen. The strategy talks about 60% of all those in education to be using active transport or public transport, and 30% non-educational transport to be active or public transport users. And I can't see any way that actually is going to occur with the unwillingness or it's not actually unwillingness, I think it is inability of understanding what is required from a strategy right through from operational to governance. So unfortunately the Cycling Governance Group will possibly disappear, and there's a move to move them back to the TAs who actually are not capable of actually enacting, especially with Napier. I don't think you actually have an active transport committee, active transport committee. So you may have one on paper, but it's actually not active. Hastings has got one, but even there it's just a reporting, and the engineers unfortunately have got a hold of these particular groups and make decisions, where the left-brainers, the designers, are actually not at the table or allowed at the table to speak or give their credence. So I'm a little bit worried that from a climate change, that we're actually not going to hit our targets from when it comes to actually active transport and public transport. Even public transport, Councillor Williams is doing an excellent job on demand, and we're really supporting him in that really good thinking. But apart from that, we're really struggling in that space, and the public don't see public transport as a viable option, and we need to change that. And I think the only way we can change that is we actually crowbar our community out of their holy cows, which is cars, because cars get all the space, all the right-of-ways, all the parking places, and so there is no incentive for us, except for maybe a $3 or $3.50 or $4 a litre petrol price. And then we, of course, get moved into electric cars, and they still get all the road and all the parking spaces. So I think we need to have a change of mind in this particular area, where we actually need to make it more difficult for cars to, for instance, get to CBDs, to get to workplaces, so that actually the other options like public transport, walking or cycling is actually becoming a viable option. Because at the moment, it's still the motor car that actually gets all the opportunities, and the opportunities for active transport and public transport are minimal. So I just flagged with you that actually this discussion is happening, and you won't have to listen to my ranting in future for much longer, because this cycle governance group will disappear. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, thank you, Councillor. I'd like to commend you for your report, and I'd like to say keep the faith. I'd also like the meeting to note that Councillor Van Beek rode from Twyford to the council meeting today on his bike.
It wasn't done on purpose or planned, sorry.
The point is, just make note for the record that you rode to the meeting and you'll ride home in his jacket, shirt and tie, with his plastic jacket over in case it rained or got something other. And I thought you were leading by example. And this is a very good thing. We need people to lead by example, and congratulations to you for that. I do agree with you on the point that the rise in petrol prices is likely to help. I had cause to go to Auckland the other day in a private car, and I filled up in Auckland and just about passed out when the tank got to the top. I was in shock, and it's going to get worse. So this will cause a lot of people to rethink, including myself. So we need to do something here. So keep going. You'll win in the end. Any other comments? Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. I just first want to ask, how safe was it cycling to work today?
Well, I drive with a very bright orange jacket, and I'm generally another half a metre taller than any car, so people stay away from me. The only thing is, the unsafe thing is the abuse that I get. I'm riding on a painted trail, cycle trail, and I get told to get off the road. I don't know why. I'm doing 50k, I've got an electric bike. And when I'm a turbo, to do 50k. And it really unfazzles them, because they think they have got the right of being there by themselves, and not actually being passed by some big bloke in orange, which is half a metre above their car. So, was it safe? No, not at all. You know, every time I get to a roundabout, 16 grandchildren, they may all come one day.
So the next question is, I'm assuming that you envisage the CBD being unattainable by car, so that would improve your safety. What are your, how much, do you think this is something we can achieve in Hastings, in Hawke's Bay?
I've travelled around the world, and I've seen countries like Seville in Spain. Within 5 years, they increased their active transport by 1,000%. And not because they were on a very low platform, but they actually really made things move. And what they did, and I still remember 2020 when we were in total lockdown, I sent an email to Rick and said what we should be doing. While we're in lockdown, we remove half the car parks out of Hastings and Napier CBDs and put trees there and cycleways, and nobody will be the wiser. And when we come back, we'll all be a lot happier travelling to work. Of course, it never happened. I got a hooray from Rick. But I think there is ways of doing this. For instance, stop smoking in cafes and bars. In New Zealand, we thought that wasn't possible. You're out of your head. But look, it happened, and we're all happy doing it, and we feel a lot better because of it. So I'm 100% sure it can happen, and I've seen it done around the world.
Chair, can I
Thank you.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Look, Councillor Van Beek, I pledge to you that Cycling for a Purpose will continue to have a direct voice and place around the Transport Committee table through one structure or another, and we need to optimise that structure so that the connection with the current cycling governance group is not lost. Point two, is yes, it is vital equally that there is implementation by the territorial authorities that actually control the road resources to implement the strategy that we've actually put in place. The third point is if Hawke's Bay can't do this, no one can. We've got a flat region with fantastic weather, and if we can't cycle to work, to shop or whatever, who the heck can? Point 4 is, and this is absolutely remarkable, we put in a business case for a multi-mode program business case. We put in a bid for a business case for the Expressway that could have involved a safe cycling road, because you're talking about cycling roads here, not painted, but cycling roads that are safe for people. Yep. And we were told that was declined, get this, because the funding budget for cycling was over-allocated. Okay, this is, the government that has declared a climate change emergency has set a budget that was so over-allocated we couldn't get a business case for a multi-mode corridor to shift cars off the expressway into another lane. So that's the government funding constraints that just simply aren't in step with its own aspirations and vision, and we as a Transport Committee, again, need to leverage regionally for a better deal. So thank you for bringing this to the table. It's not lost on me. The word has been received.
Thank you.
All right. Oh, Councillor Orms.
Thank you, Chair. It's quite sad to hear about the direction of your committee, but I do think the offer is quite a good one, actually. Would align really well if that's what your current committee would like to do, because I know how passionate you are about getting our people active and finding active transportation, as does Martin in terms of the on-demand transport and improvement of our public transport system. So I'd just like to share that, that is really sad to hear, but if it means moving into something moulded to strengthen that committee, that'd be fantastic. Sure. But yeah, thank you. Thank you for your work.
Michelle, Mike, do you have a comment you'd like to make? No? Okay. All right, would someone like to move that the received note councillors' reports for the meeting of outside bodies? Councillor Ormsby, Councillor Lambert. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Carried. Minor items. Here we have fly dumping.
Okay. Once again, another only little minor pet project. I drive on Sunday past Windsor Park, Splash Planet, and there is about 8 plastic rubbish bags, a couch, a broken bike, on the lawns of Splash Planet. I thought, Twyford, I could get that, nobody will see when you're dumping it. But this actually was dumping on council land in the middle of town, So once again got me thinking, and I've had a discussion with staff about this, and I think it's not up to, we can't as councils trying to find a solution, because we've been around the trap so often, even around this table. What is the answer? I think what we really need to do is actually get an outside group that is actually skilled in developing strategy by interviewing people and finding out. And I'll give you one example of the most successful scheme that ever came out of New Zealand immigration was the Hbrc scheme. That was exactly done like that. So academics got the virtual industry in the room. We had an IRD person, Chatham House rules, and an undocumented worker. We had an illegal contractor. They were sitting in one room, being filmed, notes taken, and we actually went through the whole process, what happens to actually get fruit to the German market shelf. That was our whole process. And so they filmed us and listened to us, and we did that for 12 weeks. And the reason why it actually was really successful, because the lunch was phenomenal. And they said that on purpose. The lunch, I've never seen lunch like it, because that meant that everybody continued to commit to come to this particular meeting, even the undocumented worker. And we had supervisors, we had an orchard manager, I was an orchard owner, we had pack house manager and an exporter. They were all there. And they actually had a project to find out what really was the issue. And the issue was the hand on the apple. That's how simple it was. We would have never thought about it, but it was the hand on the apple. The hand on the apple is the start of the whole process. And if this is a documented, sustainable hand, we have a process in place that we actually can trust, and people will start to make investment again. And hence we got the RSC, and you all know the RSC scheme, how successful it has been. Imagine if we didn't have RSC right now, no apples would be picked. Virtually no apples would be picked, okay? And we wouldn't have an industry under COVID. So I think we should do something similar with fly dumping. We all racking our brains what to do. I must say, beautification does really help, and I think also tangata whenua, when a park becomes owned by tangata whenua and it's seen it's actually your land, you won't see graffiti, you won't see fly dumping. So that's little things that you can think about. But I think we need to actually employ people who actually are really trained in this particular area to actually come up with a strategy for fly dumping for Hawke's Bay. Not just Hbrc, but it's actually Hawke's Bay. The TAs need to be involved in as well. So that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Very good point. Thank you. Michelle.
Okay, so my corridor today is just to speak about the great environmental work of Kaola Te Whenua, which is a provincial growth fund project, environmental project that is headed by Hilton Collier, and I get to find out what they're doing through their project manager, my whanaunga, Renee Thompson. So they are, they've been going for a year, I think we're in the second year, and they are teaching 16 rangatahi how to feed, and they're working on 5 to 6 station Māori land blocks, Māori stations, and Wairoa, Niwa, Tuaroa, Tuahara, Aramatua, Whakaari, Otanui, and I think Tupimuki, not quite sure about that, but the last one. But that involves 53 kilometres of fencing off the waterway, and they've been doing some tremendous work there. Also pest control, and they recently purchased our nursery plant. They're cleaning out our whole nursery, but they're planting this year 100,000 native trees. And I think it's associated with their fencing as well. So that's just phenomenal work. It's highly likely, they have to do a lot of tickets as well, and it's highly likely that out of that training, they will get about half a dozen fencing contractors. They're doing business courses and things to skill them up on those sort of things. But the main obstacle for them, those who've learned all the skills, will be the equipment you have to obtain when you go into fencing contracts. But one thing with wild areas, because of they're learning on flat, but they're learning with the spade. They're not using the machinery. So because of the hills we have, you have to do it by hand. A lot of it you can't use the tractors, but they are useful in other areas. So yeah, just wanted to highlight that, and I'm incredibly proud of our people and what they're doing here, and that's what it takes, the whole community, and yeah, I just can't say, just big up to them. Like, kia ora. This was something positive to end hui with. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. That's a very positive report. Okay, we now move on to item 13, Hbrc Internal Review, Coastal Hazard Strategy Implementation. Paper.
Thank you, Chair. So got Simon Bendel here in the room. He's the project manager for our coastal strategy. And I thought to start with, I'd just lead you through how we got here. So back in July of last year, presented a paper with the Ashore report, which recommended that the Regional Council take a leadership role in the execution of the strategy. And that was endorsed by this council. And there was some other work that you asked us to do, which was around a Memorandum of Transition, which we've commenced and taken to a workshop in December of last year. And also asked us to bring back a bit of a review of 8 subjects. So I won't go through the 8 subjects. We then came to a workshop to help identify the size and shape of this piece of work and how we could answer those particular questions asked. So the general arrangement of the work was agreed. Staff recommended a number of workshops. We ended up with a paper and bring that paper back to the council. And then through the chair and Councillor Van Beek, we did some fine tuning, which was endorsed by the council decision at workshop, into the format we have now. So we've brought this this summary back to council as an information paper. And then the big decision, of course, is around the Memorandum of Transition, and so that will be coming back to the CNS committee in a couple of weeks, and then to the full council for the March council meeting to enable a decision to be made around the Memorandum of Transition. So, look, it's a huge amount of work boiled down into 20-odd pages. Really, we were going to take it as read, and then happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. Questions? Just before we start, I note this is a paper to note and receive. We're going to have a substantive debate later on, and we'll go through either a planning day or a corporate strategic committee. So we're heading to having the ultimate decision on this, whether we proceed or not, in March council meeting. So with that in mind, questions? Councillor Curtin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chris, I just wonder whether we could go to page 5 of the report, table 1. I just want to understand the prospective staffing arrangements. You've identified in table 1 new staffing, 1 additional FTE under regional assets, strategic asset management. Moving across, I go to regional projects and another FTE there, is that correct? And then underneath that is the specialist advice. In the first column there's 200,000, in the second column there's 300,000. Do I add those together to get the quantum of FTE resource needed or indicated? Is that how I read that?
Yes, so that's correct. So it's an amount in each column for that specific function. So you'd add the two numbers together for $500,000. So
I get 5.3 FTEs in total, or the equivalent thereof. So the 200k, 300k is 500 plus the 150 plus 150. Is that how I read that?
Okay, yeah, so the 150 is a notional operational cost of 1 FTE, which is the salary plus the overhead, etc. So there's
2 there plus the 500k below it.
That's correct.
Yeah, so it's 800k?
Yep, so it transition up to 800,000 over time.
And I note you haven't been able to quantify the science input. There are a number of science input implications, but to date, and as far as this paper is concerned, that remains unquantified. So this paper suggests if some of the work was to be done in-house, we could look at detail in that. That's probably another FTE. But for a lot of that specialist work, we're actually better off procuring that from the market, particularly around the consenting processes. So making an assumption around that, we could be talking about $1 million of operational costs going forward, given the paper. Is that correct? So that's based around specialist consulting and staff. The majority of the operating costs is forecast to be gravel renourishment, which is in the millions. Sure. Okay. Can I then just take you to page 18, table 10, table 11. I'm just trying to understand, when I'll go back one page to table 4. You've noted operational budget 300,000 in table 4. I'm just trying to correlate the close to $1 million of operational costs that we've identified versus the operational budget of 300k. Can you help me there, please? Yeah, so that ramps up over time. So we've got the 2 staff there, which is the project manager is funded out of the capital, so that's not an operating budget. So we've got a provision for staff there, and then we've also got some additional funding for the strategy review.
So that comes in over time. It doesn't all start in the first year.
So reading that, you've capitalised the specialist input into the ongoing capital.
So as per the first table, anything to do with capital delivery is funded out of the capital budget, is capitalised. So that's the project management effort, and any special advice required for the delivery of the capital solutions is capitalised as part of the value of that asset.
So therefore, you've landed on table 12, 13, with the implications for rates based on those two inputs.
That's correct, and it's important to note that this is just a high-level indicative impact on rates. Of course, as we've explained, we would go through a process to alter our rating policy, and it would be very much around the beneficiary pays a process, and so it would be very likely different for each cell on the coast. But what we've said is we can't do that work at the moment, and there's a significant effort from council in helping making some decisions around those. So we've really averaged it out as an impact under a scenario that everyone contributed. This is the typical impact to rates.
And finally, Mr. Chair, in drawing that conclusion about the overall impact and taking into account its uncertainty, is that comprising targeted rate and general rate as a composite to arrive at the figures you've got? Is that how that's worked?
So these figures are based on a general rate scenario. If every ratepayer
so it's general rate, not a targeted rate.
So we haven't been able to create a targeted rate model simply because there's a huge amount of work to do that, and it would be different for every cell.
Yep. So you made an assumption that just for the sake of the paper, that let's apply it all to general rate and figure it out later on.
Well, it's to provide a guide that we're not talking about doubling the regional council rates, for example, across the whole ratepayer base.
And that general rate is you've made an assumption right across the whole region.
That's my understanding. We did have Ross here, but yes, that is correct.
Any other questions? Councillor Foss.
Thanks, Chair. Just para 113, topic 8, it's just in around the carbon footprint of the proposed works.
Yep.
And it describes some guesstimates of the carbon impact on what you're doing. Is there a further example there on the impact of that on our net council's carbon balance sheet? Have I missed that somewhere? So it says the cost of the activity in a carbon terms of what you're doing, you've used $85, I think, per unit. The council has a carbon balance sheet, or it's going down that road. Yep. What's the impact of this on it, and then what's the residual, and is there any advice from the finance team on this?
Yeah, so I guess we've estimated the value to offset the carbon used for the projects. We haven't in this paper compared that to either to our existing stock of carbon credits, or in fact added it on to our base emissions. So that's work we can do, but here we're simply presenting the current cost to offset those emissions.
Yeah, that's fine. But next steps are we have a finite positive carbon situation in the bank, which we, as a council, and we'll keep chewing into for nice little bits and pieces.
Yep.
So it'd be good to keep an eye on that as much as we do.
Yep. So we haven't presented that in this paper.
Understand, but if we could see that next time.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions?
One
Councillor Williams.
very brief one. Look, thank you for the paper. I've actually found it really helpful in terms of fleshing out this this potential endeavour. My understanding, though, is that from a science perspective, under the recommendations, or what we're being advised, is that for each project that's advanced, there'd be a specific AEE that would require a detailed technical review of how any activity may affect coastal ecology, species, habitats, processes and patterns, and scale and magnitude of effect and what have you. And the recommendation that be done by a consultant. Can I just understand why then, bearing in mind my colleague Councillor Curtin's concern over rate impacts of this, We now need to do a scientific coastal ecology work stream involving gap analysis and going through the range of matters that are covered at paragraph 59. I know you've been asked to give us an assessment of the science outputs, but just why the double up there? Why do we need to preload all of this?
So the 60, I guess, so one of the things that one of the risks of the strategy is that we actually set out to deliver something that's unconsentable, for example. So we've done a high-level assessment of that through the Mitchell-Daish work, and there's some outcomes in this paper. We also wanted to do a similar thing from an environmental and ecology perspective to make sure that the project is preparing, particularly for any background information. So the gap analysis is to prepare us to understand what is the work we need to do over the next few years to be well prepared for a consent. So that's So we're really doing background monitoring to prepare for a consent, so that when we start the project, we're not starting at that point.
You have the deck running.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And it will also help inform some of the risks and costs of that information, of gaining that information.
Thank you, Chairman.
Applying the 7 Ps. Right. Any other questions? Okay, would someone like to move the report we received? Councillor Van Beek.
I would like to move, please.
Have a seconder? Councillor Foley. Would you like to speak, Councillor Van Beek?
Yeah, I want to thank staff and Simon for the excellent work you've done. This is a very difficult question to answer. You know, these 8 topics are not simple and straightforward. And in the short period that we've had, you've done extremely well. Some of this work needed to be done anyhow, I believe, as the strategy moves forward, and this will actually give us also more credence when we actually talk to community as well, that we actually have got wisdom and knowledge in this particular area. So from our point of view, thank you, and very well done. Thank you.
Councillor Foley. Anybody else like to speak? Councillor Curtin.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and well done to the staff for pulling together a very important element of the proposal, and that's around the impacts on the organisation. We've made a good start in identifying that. I appreciate that any exercise like this does lack a huge degree of precision, but nevertheless, it's giving us an indication, and I think those indications are important in any decision making. It is a big undertaking to add a large quantum of capital work to our program, our assets, and we discussed it earlier today, the potential liabilities that go with that. So we must assess the risk both to internally within the organisation and externally through potential actions as a result. And I would reference our current work with assets around the stop bank scenario, assets that have stood the test of time so far, but their potential risks that they carry now are very real. We've got steps in process to increase their level of protection in the response to climate change, and that's a good thing. The assets that are proposed in this, or the undertakings and the structures implicated in this proposal carry equal risk, if not greater risk, given sea rise. But also we need to explore, I think, in the next tranche of work, the liability that the ratepayer will carry. And in that, we've got a whole host of equity issues. One thing to put stop banks and protect many thousands of hectares of land, but another to protect a very limited amount of land and asset where the whole region is paying. And I reference the good people of Napier, in particular those in low-lying areas who were flooded in November 2020. They will be asked to fund the work that will protect infrastructure on the coast, coastal properties, holiday properties, communities that choose to live in that environment. Meanwhile, their level of service won't have been increased. Their exposure to climate change is still there, and they'll be asked to pay for an increased level of protection for other members of the community. And I reference Moranui, Piramai, high Māori populations. They'll be asked to carry a burden over and above many others, given that they will not receive a level of service in their home environment given climate change. So they're the assessments we need to make. I appreciate that work is due in terms of working through the equity around the rating base. It's inevitable that Napier and Hastings residents will carry the burden of targeted rates. The good people of Central Hawke's Bay and Wairau will similarly carry a general rate burden, all to respond to climate change and protection of assets in a very narrow range. I note also, Mr Chair, finally, the implications for the environment that is of particular concern to me in the coastal marine environment, where approximately 52% of the coastal margin will be impacted by protection structures. 52%, 21 odd kilometres of coastline affected. Mana Whenua have taken a strong interest in a very small patch of that in terms of the Clyde dredging. So what have they to say in regard to 52% of the precious coastline being impacted by structures to be constructed in those zones? A lot of work to do, I would suggest, to overcome inevitable problems, inevitable challenges, but particularly internally taking on risk, taking on the burden of this task and the implications for the pockets of ratepayers across the region. They're my warnings in terms of the next steps in this process. Thank you, Mr Chair.
Any other speakers? Well, I'll just say a couple of words. Firstly, I think this is a good paper and it's a good addition to our long path. I just remind Council and Councillors that at its peak here, we currently have 3 entities, 3 organisations making decisions about climate change and protecting our coasts and retreat on behalf of the same group of ratepayers. It's not different groups, they're the same people. All we have here is, we're proposing here, instead of Napier and Hastings councils and the regional council all playing their bits to make a decision, we have a single point of decision making. The region has been bedevilled by this multiplicity of decision makers in coming to suitable arrangements for the protection, the mitigation of climate change hazards. So that's the first thing. The second thing I'd make is that although there is extra work, if the ratepayers want it, it's going to be done. It's done by Napier City, Hastings City, or the regional council. And that's the proposal, is to have a single point. So it's not as if we're going to be taking on. I think we have to look at this not from the perspective of the council itself, but from the perspective of the actual ratepayer. This is something of interest to them, and it is going to be largely a targeted rate. So the decisions about this are going to be essentially driven by those who are going to be asked to pay, and they're going to have to make decisions about the cost burden of this and the benefit to them. This is not something that is going to be generally shared. It's going to be something that they are going to be carried themselves, and therefore these are going to be intensely debated and intensely political decisions. And it's politics that in the end needs to decide this. But is it best to have it decided by 3 councils in trying to work in concert, or is it best to have it decided by 1 council engaging with the same group of ratepayers? And that, I think, is at the heart of this, I think, and still right from the outset, believe it's best to be decided by one council engaging with the ratepayers on the same subject. All of this helps blend it all in, but it's still a very simple question. And it's a question we'll come back to at this council meeting next month. Right. Note that the report be received. I have a mover and a seconder, don't I? I do. All those in favour will say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Carried. I note the time is 2:45. Very good. You've been very efficient today, team. And would someone like to close our meeting? I thought we were going to have voting, so anyway.
Richard?
Our meeting.
I'd like to. Please join in. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te atawai o te tātou ariki o ihu karaiti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua tapu, ake, āmini.
All right, thank you, team. Thank you, people. Stay safe out there. Take all care and all due precautions. We're living in challenging times.